Welcome back to RDD Radio. If you have children around, though this is a Catholic channel, there will be some language, so you may not want to have them around as we get this started. Fair warning, the false Israelites are kicking our ass. And let's be honest, they act as a centralized, decentralized body. They accumulate unchecked capital and then power with the advent of the philosophy of liberalism and the theology of Protestantism. You can look back at this and it's historically true. When did usury become a thing in England? Precisely 1 month after King Henry declared himself the church rather than the one true Holy Catholic Church, and proceeded to execute numerous quote-unquote wives because he couldn't get his divorce, right? So usury comes in a month later with the Jews. We have Martin Luther and others, and the other sects of Protestantism were not devoid of this as well. It happened across the board. This also happened with the Calvinists. So the false Israelites, and I say that because the Catholic Church is the true Israel at this point. Peter the Rock, a Jew, is the one that the Catholic Church was founded on. The cathedra, the cathedral, the chair, the seat belongs to him. The curtain in the old temple tore, and the seat of Moses was not just replaced, but fulfilled with the seat of the rock, Peter. And if you read scripture, you know that there will be no new covenant after this one. It's through Jesus Christ's blood. So they have accumulated power, this Talmudic cult. And Protestantism is what aided in this. Now, here's the catch. In the United States, we have a lot of young men, and don't get me wrong, I am very much in favor of the potential for a third way. But for me, that would have to look like Mussolini's fascism. And why is that? Because Protestantism overall has created loose morality. It's been a window for corruption, not just for the Jews gaining power through usury. You've got divorce, porn, drugs, bad books. Now we have an Epstein class government where the WASPs essentially lost power and the Epstein class has taken power. And you know, the false Israelites are always trying to spin this back around to get us back on track with liberalism again, when clearly the only thing that has worked last century was the third way under Mussolini, was kind of a hybrid third way under Franco. Those are the only two. Well, there were others, but we'll get to why some of the others don't work momentarily. But you have people like Eric Weinstein. And he says Jeffrey Epstein was never the real story. That's interesting. And he panders to what we already know. For the first 13 minutes of this video I watched of him, And he talks about all the things that have happened. He doesn't deny Epstein. He says it's true. But he says that's never the real story. And he goes through a list of all of our other grievances that we already have, and I won't name them here. Because we're all on the same page. We know what's going on here. But then, after pandering to us for 13 minutes, he tells us with conviction that liberal democracies and the Enlightenment are the answer to our civilizational problems in the West. He immediately props up pluralism, absolute pluralism, and the post-World War II narrative once again, where the communists and liberalism won the day. The United States siding with the communists. General Patton saying we fought the wrong enemy. Essentially saying we should have been allied with the Axis powers. I have a lot of respect for General Patton, by the way. A whole lot of respect for him. Not just because of that. But he goes on to tell us this false Israelite, this Talmudic cultist, and maybe he doesn't even follow the Talmud, but I'm just making generalizations here because these people all work together, especially the Ashkenazi and the Sephardic Jews. They've got their own racial hierarchy. We'll get to that. But it's a psychological setup. He confirms what we already know. And then he talks about what has literally destroyed us. That's the solution. More of the same is the solution. This is the rope-a-dope. Muhammad Ali style. Similar to like the Book of Five Rings, you really need to look at the art of warfare as more than just pure war. These are the psychological tactics. They've kept us locked up in this cage of liberalism with all of the various ideologies inside of it, and that's the only way we're allowed to think. That's the only way we're allowed to think. Because they control all sides. Oh, you mean the neocons were Trotskyite Jews from New York? So they were communists? That's interesting. You mean that the communists in Russia with the Russian Revolution, it was called the Bolshevik Jewish Party? Most of them were Jewish? Oh, that's interesting. You mean they've endorsed absolute pluralism and liberalism wherever they go? Oh, that's interesting. Absolute pluralism being they want to get as many races in one place as they can. They want to disrupt everything, like all other cultures. And that's communism's basic premise too. It's just going to be based on workers, right? We won't even get to the false economics of the situation, but just the general cultural elements of it. And we see this with liberalism too. It's out to destroy communities that have preserved their ethnicity, their ethnic identity, and their culture, and their land, their blood and their soil. They're against it. And they're doing this so that they can maintain their power in the areas that they've already taken through the banking industry. Because if it weren't for the Protestant Revolution, there's no way that the Rothschild banking cartel ever could have come into existence. Yes, there were problems within the church in individual areas with this, where some kings would permit it. It would be a problem. And then there were issues and all kinds of things would happen. But generally speaking, the church kept it in check. Now, what we have to do to beat this, the way they've had this decentralized, centralized organization where they have the United Jewish Congress that was decentralized first, they took over the banks, then they started gradually taking the blood and the soil and the resources, breaking up the blood, taking the soil, taking the resources, run it up on leverage, play games with the economy through sleight of hand, which is really theft, by printing off money. And not only do we have usury anymore, it's not just usury, it's just straight up theft, okay? When you can manipulate interest rates and you can play with the money. We have to unite like they did. But there's an issue here. There's an issue. Jews look theologically divided, but the Talmud, and especially the occult, racial Gnosticism, it unites them through Kabbalah. They have their own racial divisions. They are racial supremacists. You could basically say it's a part of their theology. Not all of them. Because below the Ashkenazi and the Sephardic, you then have the Middle Eastern Jews and then the black Jews, right? Or the Talmudic cult. So, Protestants, you may not be ready to hear this. But we have to have a Catholic umbrella. And you need to trust us on how to deal with this situation. Because we were the ones that were keeping it in check in the first place. We're both infiltrated. But the Protestants have been way more internally pieced up because of liberalism. And Protestants gave the Talmudic cult their ability to go viral in civilization. So, really all you have to do is accept what most Christians already say they believe anyway. The Catholic Church is not interested in becoming the state, but it does have a place to reinforce natural and divine law. The Catholic Church doesn't want to stop you from worshiping the way that you see fit or what you believe based on what you're reading in Scripture. But what we have to do is put a check on this absolute evil because it's out of control. So I would humbly implore you to look into the Catholic Church if you're Protestant, and also, if you can't become Catholic, like Charlie Kirk apparently was on the way to doing, at least trust us to govern. Because what we have right now is all out of order. We were founded on improper theology and philosophy, especially philosophy. Protestants and Catholics can fundamentally agree on the natural law. We can. So, enshrining natural law in Jesus Christ and the Constitution is really the way forward, and ending absolute religious pluralism. We don't need all these different races being, just like dropped on. We've been bombed. It's been a racial bombardment here, not just because they're racially different from us in this country, but because their philosophy and their theologies are completely different from ours, whether you're talking about Islam or Indians or whatever. Totally different. Not compatible. And so we have to have a limited pluralism of religion, not absolute pluralism. Protestants should be able to agree to this. Now, the big problem with the third way and the differences. This is where there's a divide. And I'm not against a Christian republic. We can't have a republic based on liberalism, but I'm not necessarily against a Christian republic. But let's talk third way. I do like it better. We can't have a third way based on racial supremacy, because that's what the Jews do. And I am not interested in becoming my enemy, because they've hijacked that movement that was against them in Ukraine. And look what's happened there. Jewish oligarch in charge, put Zelensky in charge, another Jew. And now all those young men are being put through the meat grinder and they're being replaced with third worlders. Do you think that's an accident? Sad. So there's that issue with it. The secondary issue is that it leads to real hatred. It's one thing to say, oh, we have some things in common. But ultimately, we do have to recognize that, everybody has a rational soul, but there are familial differences as well. And those differences express themselves as ethnic differences too. And we have to acknowledge the realities of that, whatever they are. And that doesn't mean that anybody gets treated differently in terms of justice on both ends of the stick. On both ends. That means if somebody goes out and commits a horrid crime, that they get whatever penalty is coming to them, despite their IQ. You can't have it both ways. We can't say this person is so, literally, like that's, the IQ is so low that they can't function in society, so we just have to keep them on the dole. But then we don't do something about regulating them and making sure they're just not out hacking people to death. They should be put away. And if the state says so, and this isn't my say, but if it's the law in your area and the state says to put them to death, then that's what the state says. I'd prefer more humane ways. There's a whole nother conversation with that, but suffice to say, the Catholic Church has been speaking to this recently in a different way. I think that's under development. And I will give my assent to certain things there that I do believe in, because I don't believe it's reached the level of absolute authority yet. But if I'm wrong, you can correct me. But this has always been a battle of which morality will be accepted, the law of Jesus Christ or the Noahide laws. And if you don't know what the Noahide laws are, one of these sets of laws grants true freedom, and the other grants our enemies the freedom to put us to death. Because the Noahide laws sound good, unless you really understand what the first one is saying. If you worship Jesus Christ, you're an idolater. You're guilty of idolatry. And you will be put to death under their law if they come to power. See, a lot of them understand the battle that they are in, and we don't understand the battle that we are in. And there's confusion being sown. And part of the confusion being sown among those that would favor integralism, syndicalism, and the third way. We have a problem with Wignats. The moment you go down the path of proclaiming your ethnicity, your race, supreme to every other one, then you have to also deny by default that all of those other people or subsets of them do not have a rational soul and thus they are animals. That is exactly what the Jews do. And we should refuse to become our enemy, because even if we got our way and we were able to build a new civilization on top of that and get rid of a lot of the moral degeneracy, it is going to degrade in 80 years. 80 to 100 years, it will degrade again, and we will have all of the same problems we had before. It first and foremost, any government is going to have to be founded on true justice, natural law, and divine law. So I don't think America goes away. We have to hold on to the entire territory of America because it's a national security issue. We have to secure all of our weapons systems. We have to kick out our enemies. We have to revitalize the economy. You know, the slogan, "Make America Great Again," actually has to mean something at the end of the day. And what it should mean is reform of our Constitution, or if necessary, throwing it out altogether. The founders weren't against that, if you remember. So there needs to be a dialogue between Catholics that are interested in the third way, like me and other good Catholics I know, Protestants that might be interested in the third way and that are hung up on this racial supremacist ideology, and also those that know there's a problem with the Epstein class, but maybe since they're American, they're just favoring a republic. I would leave you with this question, though, if that's the path you want to continue down. If we could get rid of a liberal republic and reform it, I'm for it, but I would still have concerns that it could be easily taken out. Now, that's really a topic for another time. Maybe we can discuss that if you have questions. Feel free to message me on X, although I probably won't get it right now. I have plans to return to X in terms of our private chats within about a week or two, probably two. I really want to make sure I've disconnected all of the hardwiring that got me on there a little too much. And those of you that are in the private chat, of course, you know where that is and where we talk. And if those of you that are on X and the chat's there, if you would like to get into those chats, then talk to some of the guys that are in there and I can send a link over. So that's where we're at right now. Feel free to share this if you have similar thoughts or if you have disagreements. But this is where I feel we are at right now. Our Lady of Fatima warned us about these times. I truly hope we're coming out of them, as things seem very hopeful that we have more and more conversions to the Catholic faith. And that means truly living it in every aspect. So we'll see you next time on RDD Radio.